Today is July 21st, 2016, and I am Allison Thompson, Director at Marshall Public Library, and I am here today with Charles Gamm. We're going to do an oral history for the Friends of the Library project that is available on the library's website. Charlie, thank you for coming in today. I'm curious to hear what you have to tell me today.
Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, you could set it here.
Well, the things I may say may not be interesting to somebody, but then again, whoever listens to this in the future, this is the way I seen it during the 1950s, downtown Marshall. I worked for Foster Blizzard for about 6 years. He was a major grocery store owner on the east side of Marshall and employed a lot of people, and Blizzard Ford's named after his relation. They owned most of that ground out there at one time. Anyway, I tried to get out of the grocery business. I'd worked for Foster and I wanted to get out of that for a while. I worked at Velsico like everybody else did. I actually was took shorthand and typing and was engineer to the secretary. I was a secretary to the engineers and the president of the company out there at one time. And then they went backwards, and I instead of expanding like they were going to do, they went backwards. So I got a job with Kroger's in '57, and I want to make a few comments since we're looking at a picture that was the 75th anniversary of Kroger from 1883 to 1958 is what this picture is about. And I got a few comments about a few of the people. Not that I mean bad to any of them. They were so sweet people and good to work with. But there's a few things that I'd like to just talk about. That time period, we're at the old Ford garage now. But anyway, part of the ramp was still back in the corner where I'm sitting right now. Was a storage area when I worked for Kroger's, and my work area was the northeast corner of the building, and part of the door is still there, and then the old wall. But anyway, in that time period, and we're looking at Dwayne Huey. He was a real nice gentleman. He was our store manager. He had taken over from Walter Church, Walter and Alice Church had run Kroger's at the time, and Dwayne took over, and Alice at one time actually after she left Kroger, she had a restaurant over in the building across the street where the insurance company is now, Jim Cole's building, in the basement. For a while that didn't last too long. But anyway, Alice had worked produce, and I'd worked produce before, and that's wind up running the produce department for Dwayne. Might mention Al Trez. He was a co-manager where we were here. He's related to a lot of people here in town for a long time there. And when they needed a store manager for the Casey store, so he left Marshall as being co-manager, and he ran the store where there's a big Coke sign on the downtown in Casey is where the Kroger was, and we had one here, and then of course Casey. All the little towns at one time had Kroger stores. They were small ones across the clear to Effingham, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now everything's Walmart.
Right. Anyway, as I was telling Allison at the beginning with, I'm an equal opportunity insulter here. I just want to talk about some of the good times we had. Again, Dwayne was such a nice fellow to work for and all. But I want to talk about Mildred. She's a nice lady, but she used to sit out back in the alley here, wait for us to get off. We would generally close the store at 9 o'clock, but it took about an hour to clean up and get the last customers out there and so forth. But she sat out in back with her foot on the brake, with the car in neutral, or not even that sometimes. It was just foot holding the foot, and she burned out two transmissions and one cooling system on those 57 Fords that'd be a real collector's item now to have some of those cars back. So they had the top of the line cars at the time, and they couldn't figure out what was happening to the cars until they're the last one burned out.
So why was she sitting in the back?
Just waiting for Dwayne to get off work, and instead of putting it in park or something like that, or shutting the car off, she'd run the air. Of course, that was an early air conditioning system we had back then, but the air was blowing, and
Oh, goodness.
she was a good lady. Still lived up the road not far from where I kind of grew up anyway. I'm looking at the picture here, and the first row was Dwayne Huey, and I mentioned Dwayne being so nice. Actually, when Kroger decided to close the stores up, he went with red and white, and he run red white here where the Kroger store was for a while, and then they built the other one over on Locust Street. And his brother that I went to school with, Daryl, also owns a store, and I think his family owns it now and runs it all. And they were both into red and white. Kroger's once, and then red and white. And anyway, then moving on to the his left is Lily Wood. She's from Martinsville. Wonderful lady, always cheerful and the life of the party. And I'll come back to her in just a little bit and talk to her about when we get to Joe. Well, we'll go to the back row. I'll tell you about Joe. Joe Smitley was, we thought Joe would go on with Kroger's, and all the other people were gung-ho Kroger's. I wanted to get out of the grocery business, really. But anyway, Joe took off and started working for TRW and had a good career down there. He did real well. He's got a lot of relation in Marshall. Son, kind of a second or third generation, but they got a big family that goes back a long way. Good people. His uncle one time back in '38 actually worked for Kroger. It wasn't in this location. It was down on the corner here with Kroger's in 1938. It was a meat cutter. This was Joe's uncle, and his name was also Joe Smitley. Well, while I'm talking about that, Joe, this is a long time before Joe was married. Back in that time period, while I'm looking at a pretty girl in the face, if I wanted to wait on Allison, I'd just tell somebody, say, here's coming, I want to run that register as she comes up to the register. So we would come up and take over just before Allison got up there to where I was at. He already had her groceries on the counter, and anyway, Joe kept coming up and he'd bag for the pretty girls, and then they'd disappear. And anyway, he came up one day and I was running the register beside Lily, and she says, "I'll get Joe. You just watch." So he came up, Joe ran up there, and this was a nice looking girl, and he bagged the groceries up, had it about all done, and Lily turns to him, says, "Joe, your wife just called and said to bring baby food home." And Joe stopped over there and ran, never seen the rest of the day. Poor guy. That was long before he was married and had a girlfriend and everything else, but embarrassed the daylights out of him. Lily got him all right.
That's funny.
Let me see. The next lady in the line here is Emily Fife. She was a nice gal, and she separated from her husband, and her husband, I guess her ex, had a home right on the hillside where there's a lot of wrecks as you come south out of Paris, and U5. Anyway, and her daughter is Charlotte Moorcraft, wonderful people, and I was over the Historical Society for a long time, and part of the Historical Society ground was a backyard that Emily didn't want. She built a new home, but she didn't want to have to mow any yard, so the property line goes right up almost to the back door of the house. This is on between 3rd and 4th Street and on South where the Historical Society is. Emily was a good lady. I moved next door to, excuse me, Pat White, Laura Tingley's mother, and she's another Smitley, and before she was married, nice lady. But I could always tell when Pat was at the post office, which is in the same place it is now, but she had a tendency to either have the front wheel or the back wheel on the curb. I don't know why, whether she couldn't see right or what, but it was just you knew that was her car. Whatever she was driving, she'd park on top of the curb. Well, I'm talking about that again. My position, I ran produce, and I was responsible for the back door, and the meat department was right around the corner. And Pat would come back after she'd bring a piece of pork, mainly pork. Sometimes she'd run through the cuber about a half a dozen times, and it would just about melt in your hand. But anyway, she'd say, "Here, cook this for us." And I'd wrap it up in tin foil, and I had a big hot plate that I'd put the shrink wrap over my produce and put it on there. And she said, like, nobody's going to know. Yeah, within a minute, the whole store would smell like a restaurant. The stuff was so good. But
that does sound good.
They wonder we didn't get fired. Because that same time period, the manager in most of the stores that did the same thing, they would grind coffee, and that smell would go throughout the store. And I wasn't a coffee driver, but that smell was so good that it caused people to want to buy coffee. And you always had ground coffee like that, and they do that 2 or 3 times during the day, so you'd have that smell. But anyway, we had that meat smell in the store. Well, I'm talking about that right next door to us. Jim Buechler, which turned out to be a doctor, and he worked for Kroger with me for a little while too. But his father, Raymond Buechler, had a restaurant right beside of us to the east. And then when they closed that up, they built the one out the intersection to bypass. I think, but at this present time, Wellham has a chiropractor business in there. That was a restaurant built by them back then. Buechler, Ray Buechler had been a bus driver for Greyhound, and sometimes he had friends that actually they would stop the big bus right out in front of our store, and they'd talk to Buechler in the store there. Of course, the main bus stops was down at the corner at the Archer House now, or the Marshall House across from Harlan Hall, and there's a 3-story hotel over there at that time, and that's where the buses always stopped. But anyway, occasionally they'd block the traffic right out in front of our store. Let's see what I got next there. Dorothy Staggs is the one that's in the picture I'm looking at. Dorothy was our head cashier. She was a nice lady, but she aggravated me because I knew how to do everything in the whole store, and she'd call on me when we were busy, either to bag or to run a register. And there was a little buzzer over my workstation, and I get so aggravated because I had so much to do with ordering and putting the stuff up that I'd put a piece of cardboard in the little buzzer, and I could see it like a tail of a bumblebee going back and forth. And she knew what I was doing, and after she'd put up with it so long, she needed me up front, she'd send somebody back to get me. Let me go to.
How long were you at Kroger?
I had almost 46 years with Kroger's. Since you stopped me there on that one, when I went to Terre Haute, maybe I'll wait till I get to my section for
That's
that
fine.
one.
That's fine. I was just curious.
Yeah.
I was curious how long
Well,
you were there.
I'll start. I started in '57 with Kroger's, and I ended up in 2002. But at the time, I was working here in Marshall. Excuse me. This is in '57. In '56, The metal store opened up where the MCL is, and the dollar store is in Terre Haute. And at this time, it's hard for you to believe, but that store was one of the first major supermarkets style as we know it today. At that time, there was some down in the south, Piggly Wiggly's and stuff in the south that was where they had Bass Carts and some other, but this is the first one in the actual Midwest, in the whole Midwest. We're talking about Ohio and Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan and so forth. Hallman Company had helped Kroger with that one, and that was quite a complex at the time, in the basement and the whole. Anyway, let's see. I'll tell about myself. Bill Warner is the next one in my line here. Bill's still alive and lives out by the state line. He's a nice gentleman. He cut meat and worked with Lily and the head meat cutter there behind him for a long time. Great guy. I'm gonna back up here and talk about Lily. No, it's not Lily. Dorothy Staggs' husband. Art Staggs was. I'm not making fun of him. We had a love-hate relation to him. Poor Art. His elevator didn't quite go all the way up, and but he was a faithful worker. He hauled our trash away from Kroger's, and where Allison is sitting now in the back room. This was a storage area again for our store, but right out in the alley was kind of a dump. And I had control of the back door, and all the trash come back there, and I was responsible for making sure Art didn't take anything away that it shouldn't. But anyway, it would pile up into my back room and in and out in the alley. And Art would come about 4 o'clock every day. And again, it may sound stupid now, but back in those days, we never really thought about dope, but so. Somebody at the very start, the whole people, all of them, but Dorothy was in on these stupid things. They'd tell Art as they came in the front door that Charlie's acting funny, they must be on dope or something. So, and as he'd go through the store all the way back, all these people I'm working with are giving some kind of agitation about Charlie, and then he'd get back there. I had to deal with the guy. He's all wound up by the time he got back to the back room about being doped up or something, and then again I'd have to deal with him, open the back door and help him get this stuff out of the store, and but it was the highlight of the day. And the rest of them was standing around, peeking around the corner with a smirk on their face, trying to stifle a laugh while I'm dealing with the guy. Anyway, and what even made it worse is the old dump was my father owned 13, 14 acres at the edge of town, and the way to the dump was on 3 sides of our property, and if he'd lose some of it, I was on him about that, and then he'd rave on, and of course they'd watch that. Again, the highlight of the day, it sounds kind of cruel in a way, but that's what we were doing. The whole stupid store was on, and again, it was the highlight of the day. Let me move on. I got Bill Warner and Dorothy. I'm going to the back row. We talk about Smitley. He had a good career with TRW, and his wife was faithful with the city events for years too. The next guy in line there is James Castile. I can't say too much about Jim right now. He was good to work with at the time. I think later on he had some problems and he doesn't live here anymore. He worked frozen food and the dairy, and at that time there really wasn't too much frozen food, but he in the earlier days he did do that. And his father was Drew Castile, and they lived on the east part of town. And one of his houses, the house they lived in, is one of the older houses in Marshall. It's still in 2016. It's still there. Neat house. worked at the local bank and played in the city band for years. This is Drew Castillo, and their family goes back a long way. Let me get to that guy again there, the next one of mine, hiding behind Emily Fife there. He's got a long mustache on there. And the next one was Glessy Parks. He was from Terre Haute, and he was a head meat cutter. Nice gentleman. Yeah, not being cruel, but I was sitting here, and I worked around the corner from him, and all the meat department except just a few items was behind the counter back in those days, and he would say blankety blank. I'd have another customer have to get up off his stool and wait on somebody to get him some meat. That's where he had a big roll of cheese, or even lunch meat came in a big thing, and you had to roll and you had to cut it off so much. And I think back, even when I worked at Foster Blizzard, and even here at Kroger's here, they had sawdust on the floor in there, and you drop a piece of meat on the floor, pick it up, and wash it off, and they wouldn't know any difference, you know. I know meat was a lot cheaper then than it would be now. Anyway, occasionally, Glessy'd want me to eat with him, and we went down to Tom's, and Tom's, for $1, you got more than you could eat, and poor Glessy'd gobble it down. Within a minute he'd be done, and I'm still sitting there for 5 minutes, and then mine looked like I hadn't started eating hardly. But I began to notice that in the middle of the afternoon he'd be doubling over with stomach pains, and he'd tell me that he'd worked on the railroad during the Depression years, and he had to be in a hurry to eat, and so that's why he had to gobble his food down. But it wasn't doing him any good. Oh, well, I'll talk about Glessy. I know he owned a restaurant, so I don't know where at, but had a restaurant in Terre Haute at one time, and this was in the 20s. And he, on a Saturday night, he put all his money in the bank, and he didn't even pay his employees. He was going to pay them Monday when he opened the place up. Well, he put all the money in the bank, and that's when the crash took place in 1929. And by come Monday, the first of the week, he didn't have any money to operate with, and he couldn't pay his employees. The bank wouldn't give him his money back, and so they lost his business, lost about everything.
That's so sad.
And it's one of those deals during the 1929 crash. The last fellow in behind Will, Bill Warner here is Jim Jones, and he was only here for a little while, and I think he came from up here from Robinson, and there's no relation to the author that is from here in Marshall, but anyway, he knew something about produce, and I was wanting to get out of the produce department, and so Dwayne put him back there where I was, and I think I ran the register maybe for a while then after that. And it wasn't too many years after that they decided to close Kroger's up, and which was a shame because both my wife worked at the phone company, and I'd bought a house not too far from here, and we both walked to work. I guess to get back to myself there, I'm behind Lily Wood, the third one from the back on the left side. I think I hit that a little bit before I started working with Foster Blizzard when I was a teenager there in '51, and I took Foster's truck, and he had a panel truck, and I don't even think it was long before I had a license, I think, and I was driving his truck and delivered groceries to a lot of people in town. And I painted a lot of the barns out there at his house years ago. The judge at the time and the lawyer, I'm not getting the name out here now, was right across the street from him.
So tell me again, Blizzard Ford, you said is named after this particular family?
Blizzard Ford.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Now, where does the Ford come in? Blizzard Ford?
Well, hard to believe, but of course this Route 1 and the bridge has been worked on several times, but that sucker is flooded and it looked like the Wabash River, even more than that at times with years, and that washed that all out several times. But from the I would say from the 30s up to the 50s. I'm not just sure when they finally fenced it off, because people kind of made a dump out of it. As you turn off the road, I'm going north from Marshall, and you turn there right after you cross the bridge. Well, for one thing, around the corner, my wife was baptized, and a lot of people were baptized in that creek to the north there, and as it makes a bend going around. It was kind of, but right as you came off closer to where the bridge is now, people actually took their car, drove right into the water, and washed their car. And you never thought about sand or doing anything for the finish. You're actually washing your car down there, and people are swimming in there. Just like right at this time, I'm talking to Allison. It's hot outside. Well, that place would be busy from morning till night. The people in the water splashing around, because that's long before we had a swimming pool. Casey was the first one that actually got a pool here, and I can remember raising money for the pool that we've got, that they're wanting to replace now, because I think it's been worked on a couple times before. But
so it was people taking their Ford vehicles down there,
right,
to clean them and to hang out.
But the name Ford comes from a low place where you cross. For this is just nothing. Ford is nothing recent. It's a fact of something that you call for years a Ford, where you cross the river.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Okay. One of the things I was thinking about was one of the highlights to me. I never thought about it at the time, but in '57, we used to sneak in the back of a writers' colony, and they had signs, "Keep out, keep out." Well, and of course, they didn't want to keep us nasty little boys from looking in there. But anyway, sneak in and watch that, and occasionally I was an Elvis fan, and after I watched Elvis, Entourage comes in with all these people, I remembered back that we'd see the same thing with James Jones at the theater, the old theater coming. Jim probably even paid the bill and got popcorn stuff for him, but he'd come in and there was a dozen of them. They could come in and watch the movie at the old theater over on the corner, across from the courthouse, and that we were too stupid back then to know what they're looking at. They were giggling at watching the girls, and we were spending most of our time watching them laugh and carry on. And anyway, that and then twice I carried out groceries for Gloria when she married Jim, and she parked. I don't remember what kind of car they had now. It wasn't that fancy of a car, but she parked right out in front of the store, and I took groceries out twice. And she tried to tip me $20 back there, and I wouldn't take it. Now, the Kroger had a policy, and I didn't want to take tips, but $20 was like $100 today, and it was hard to resist. And she couldn't understand why I didn't want to take the money. But really, I get to brag about it now anyway.
That's right.
No money, but
yes.
I did that for Gloria several times, and she was just like on TV, just tough to keep your eyeballs in your head. Anyway, I don't want to rave on about too much stuff. I left here in '61. They closed the store up, and I went to Terre Haute, and I ran produce where Channel 38 was, or at the present time there's a blood plasma center in there. It's the block south of the courthouse, present courthouse. But at that time, when I went over there was an awful lot of change in the Terre Haute area. That area, believe it or not. 3rd Street was like, just a small one. Most of the traffic went down on 7th Street, and where they have the sign, which I watched them put up, Crossroads of America. Well, we were Crossroads of America too, right here at one time, before all the bypasses went around. Same as Terre Haute. They either went to Terre Haute and come down 41 and would be right there on between Wabash and 7th Street, or right down here by our street. We had Route 1 and 40. We had all the traffic from people coming out of Chicago, going to Florida, and coming from New York to California, went right through town. We had all those filling stations just everywhere, filling stations and little places to stay. At the edge of town where my folks owned ground, Harvey Hurst had this one little patch on the other side. I think they did that on both sides of the creek. People would pull off, and they're from around the other side of the world. We were driving across the country, and they'll pull off and have their lunch there by the creek. That's the east side of Marshall, and it's still a low spot along in there. Back to Jim Jones. They tore the hotel, Deming Hotel. No, I'm sorry, not Deming. The Terre Haute House down. But on the streets section, there used to be a bar in there, and you could, if Jim wasn't in one of the bars in Marshall, this in the early '50s, before he met Gloria, he's either in the bar in Marshall or over there at that one in Terre Haute, and. I remember seeing the guy, but I didn't. I was just a young fellow then. I don't know. Years later, I probably said it on the first tape that Jim Jones and Johnny Snedeker rode motorcycles together, and then eventually I came along the upstart. I rode with the Snedekers and all of them later on in life. Did you have some other questions for me? I don't know.
It's all very interesting. I've enjoyed learning more about the history of this building where I now work, and it's where it's been over the years. So I've enjoyed that.
Well, Allison's saying that this may sound funny to you, somebody out in the future listening to it, but I was just a young fellow when I was working with Kroger here. And I can remember around Christmas time, the way things have changed. The zone manager of the whole Midwest, I'm talking about Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and he came in, and actually I was back in the back doing an inventory, and it was kind of a dark area back in, again, about where we're at or even farther back here. And he came back and said, I want to shake your hand, and it about freaked me out because this guy, which you'll really appreciate, but those people would not do that today. They're above everybody else. But here the little guy on the bottom end, and he come back and shake my hand, wish me a Merry Christmas, and something that stayed with me. Of course, I got later on, I shook hands with some of them that was same position, but they didn't come back in the back room and find me. My wife worked for the phone company, and there was the employees of the telephone company. They employed a lot of men, a lot of women over the years, and the time has changed on that. The telephone company back then was right behind the Harlan Hall at the alley where they have a kind of a parking lot, a space there. They got a new building there on the south side anymore at this date, but this other was a small little building, and again there was a lot of early women worked there over the years. Got good employment. That and Vesico was some of the better employees in Marshall.
Well, thank you for coming in today to the library and sharing the history, especially since this is our 100th
I can
year.
mouth off one more motorcycle story. I had one of the better and first Harley Sportsters in Clark County, and I've been working with Kroger's. When they closed it, I went to Terre Haute and worked there again at that second Walnut store, and actually put my motorcycle in the back door. And if you go look and see now, this is again in 2016. There's a tower there at the back door, back of that building. But that's again same as it was where Alice and I are sitting now. There was a dumpster out back there, and I had control of the back door. But anyway, I put my bike inside there. But one time, really quickly, I came home one night. I worked. Only times I worked late was 9 o'clock on Wednesdays, and I came home one day on a motorcycle. And at West Terre Haute, there was a guy with a brand new Mercury. Nice car. I don't know what color or the right year that was, but this guy took off quickly out of West Terre Haute. He's speeding, and so I stayed with him, and I just, he was running along at about 100 mile an hour as the fastest cars go, and I could stay in third gear. I was passing him, and I thought I could easily outrun the guy, but anyway, I just followed him to Marshall. And it freaked me out because he turned off, and here came Marshall, and instead of going by the bypass around, and we were running about 100 mile an hour all the way, and he slowed down just enough to come in, and then he stopped at the stoplight. The stoplight or 1 and 40 was the four-way. Right when he stopped there, headed south, going as fast as he could again, and I stayed with him, and he went south. And I think he made ground. I don't know how he made ground turn, but I stayed with him wide open down there. Well, he was running wide open. I could easily pass him. But as he got south there, past it, way down there, past the state park, I thought, what the? I had to be to work at 7 o'clock the next morning, and again, this was probably getting toward 10 o'clock then. I'm like, that fool's going to wreck that as it gets down to West Union. So anyway, I turned around, come and put my bike away. Well, the next morning, I drive my car to work. Well, Kenny Little had its DX station at the corner down here where the glass shop is now. There was on the back wrecker, that car on the back of that wrecker, and I don't know about the guy in the car. I never did find out about any of it, but the car, he'd wrecked it like I thought when he got down toward past West Union, and anyway, sticks with me.
Well, yeah, that would stick with you. That would. Route 1 can be very dangerous, for sure.
I tell you one more story if it's in. I rode West Union with Ronnie Brown from Livingston on a Saturday night, and Ronnie was such a nice gentleman, and he had a real pretty red Triumph, and he wouldn't ride any faster than 65. And by that time, I'd been riding with all these other great people. Wouldn't run any slower than about 80. But anyway, Ronnie and I rode to West Union just to ride and be out on a cool evening. And anyway, we both lived on the east side. And Ronnie went on and we said goodnight. Well, on a Tuesday night, that's when the railroad still went by out where Ron Stone's at, has a buildings out there, Fred Idle and all that complex now. The railroad again. Ronnie passed a whole bunch of cars, trains going by, hit the train, dead her in the doornail. Ronnie, I think, was 19 or 20. Nice young gentleman. I don't know what he was thinking, but it's too late. All right, Allison.
That's tough. Thank you again for coming in today. I appreciate it.